What's up, everybody, and welcome to another meta breakdown. We are going to continue our journey into standard. So basically, this is the second video in this series. So you got to keep in mind the goal of what we're trying to do is break down each week the past tournaments results to maybe give you some ideas of what decks you should play this week, or maybe in your own local tournaments coming up this coming weekend. I like to do this on Monday so you have time to maybe purchase some cards or update your decks in some ways that are going to be a little bit more competitive, or maybe some new tech that you really like to see. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this past weekend's results, take a look at the meta, see if there's been any shifts, and then we'll discuss. All right, so let's go ahead. As far as the actual meta goes, we're not seeing much change in the actual top four decks. Mid-range, the Dimir mid-range is still the #1 slot. We have Gruul Aggro in #2. We have Red Deck Wins in #4. Golgari Demons there, but then like slightly behind, you have Boros Burn. So basically, it's red aggro, right? We have the Red Deck Wins, we have the Boros Burn, and the Gruul. These are all just aggro red decks with a strong mouse base. With a little bit of flavor added to them that makes them slightly different. So all that to be said, really kind of the #2/3 spot is just going to be red something. And then we have Dimir, maintaining that #1 spot, and Golgari in that #3 spot. But what I want to do is actually take a look at some win rates, see if there's been any changes in these decks, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the tournament results themselves. So if we go, this is one of my favorite views to look at. We can adjust the date range. So you see here 180 days. 180 days gives us 5,236 matches to look at. A lot has changed in 180 days. Foundations came out. So I don't like to go back that far. We might go back like 30 days. So we still get 2,310 results, which is a pretty good number to take a look at the meta. If we want to see even more specific, though, we can go down to 15 days, but we'll keep it at 30 days because at least that puts us post foundations and gives us a little bit of something to look at. And then we'll also just click over to the 15 days here in a moment just to see what we're looking at. And for all those at home that are wondering what we're using mtgdecks.net. I'll include a link below. I really like this website. I like the way it organizes information. Not sponsored in any way by this. But there's a couple of things that you can look at, right? So you can look at overall win rate. We see Domain Zur at 56%. We have Jeskai Convoke at 58%. And Esper Pixie, this one has really popped up in the last little bit. Shout out to another creator, Ash Lizzle. She's a big Magic the Gathering streamer, as well as a YouTuber and content creator. She posted a video about Esper Pixies, and it grew in popularity. You're seeing it all over the ladders in Arena. Then we have Dimir Demons, and then Boros Mice. Now we're starting to get into these matches that don't have a lot of stats, so you got to kind of take them with a grain of salt. So the Boros Mice, the Mono Black, Bloodletter, so on and so far, they might have higher win rates, but we're only looking at 28 matches versus 433 matches of the Dimir mid-range. But this gives you a general idea of how it matches up. How is Dimir matching up against Mono White, the Jeskai Convoke, the Red Deck Wins, the Boros Burn, the Temur Otters, right? So what we're seeing is a good breakdown of these numbers. So use them to figure out kind of like how you want to match up with your meta. Again, keep in mind, we're going big for this. When you design your deck for a tournament, you need to understand your meta. What I mean by that is, what are other people in your community playing? So when you show up to your tournament, what are other folks playing? A good way to figure this out is just walk around. Maybe you have a bye in the tournament. You might have gotten done with your match early. You can just walk around, take a look at what people are playing. Nobody minds you just kind of watching a match, and you can just take a mental note, or even if you want to go so far as to write it down, you could write it down as to what you're seeing. And a lot of folks too, just talk to folks, ask what they're playing, and you start to get an idea. You start to make friends at these events, and you start to understand what people are bringing to the event, and then you can kind of match your deck up to the meta. And this is some really good information to be able to do that. So all that to be said, this is a good resource. If we want to take a look at the last 15 days, we can see another sort of change in the overall statistics. So we see that Dimir mid-range go up, the Gruul aggro go up, Esper Pixie is up here near the top. We're capturing all 15 matches, or 52 matches. So all that to be said, the numbers do change from week to week. So it's worth taking a look and seeing what's going on. You can see Gruul aggro is just kind of dominating right now. It's doing really good. But so is Dimir midrange. So Dimir is doing really well against some of the top decks, right? The red deck wins, the Esper Pixie, the Golgari Demons, Mono White Tokens, where we see Gruul aggro pull ahead just a little bit. It's going to have obviously a better win rate against the mirror match. It's having a better win rate against the Pixies, a better win rate against just the standard red deck wins. So all that to be said, Gruul aggro looks to be pulling to the top here in the last 15 days. But you're not just here to understand what is the breakdown of win rates. You want to understand what's going on in the tournament world. So we can come up here to the standard tournaments. And so there's a couple of things to look at, right? We want to go for this past weekend. So we're going to be looking at the 29th, the 28th, the 27th, and maybe the 26th. So we have a few tournaments to take a look at. If you caught the last video, one thing that I do point out, we can skip over the leagues. So the leagues that just kind of break down any deck that got 5-0 wins in a MTG online event. Where you really want to look at MTGO is the challenges. The challenges actually declare a winner. There is a first through whatever position in the tournament. So they're definitely worth looking at. And they're bigger events too. You see 64 players. Another thing to keep in mind is that MTGO is generally considered to have stiffer competition. So to get first in an MTGO challenge is a really, really strong feat. And definitely worth taking a look at what those decks are. So we have a few decks to click through. So we're going to click through some. We're going to skip some, like the leagues. There's a few leagues in here that we're going to skip over. But we're definitely going to take a look at the challenges. With some of these smaller in-person tournaments, we also take those with a grain of salt. One thing I do like about the mtgdex.net website is that they have these number of stars. So the number of stars tell you how big the event is. 3 stars is bigger than 2 stars. There's bigger than 1 star. But then they have these massive stars. So we see the standard super qualifier here. This is going to be one I'm really excited to take a look at. But let's go ahead and click through. Let's start at the furthest away and work our way up. So this would have happened on Friday. We have a standard challenge, 64 players. In first place, we had a Dimir midrange. Second place, we're going to have Temur Otters. Third place, we'll have Gruul aggro. And then I usually kind of stop in the first through third, but we can also kind of just glance down below. We see another Gruul aggro, a Dimir midrange, and a Mono White Tokens, another Temur, and an Azorius Flash to kind of round out the top 8. But what I like to do is I like to click into these and see if any tech has changed. So we all know that Dimir carries a pretty standard package of the Fairy Masterminds, Enduring Curiosity, Floodpits Drowner. We'll see it go back and forth between Floodpits Drowner and sort of Deep Cavern Bat, but Floodpits Drowner has been sort of pretty standard recently. Sheoldred of the Apocalypse, we're seeing that more common as like a one-of in the main. Spyglass Siren is part of the standard package, and Tishana Tidebinder, we'll see that in various quality or quantities in the main. Sometimes we'll see it fully in the sideboard in replacement of the Preacher of the Schism being in the main. But all that to be said, Tishana's is not uncommon. Over here, we're running 2 Annoyance, 3 Cutdowns, and this has been a really interesting tech change. So instead of a lot of the like 3 steps ahead is one, and then there was the other counterspell. I'm forgetting the name of it. There's another spree counterspell that was really common to put in the main. But now what we're seeing for counterspells in the main is the Spell Stutter. And the Spell Stutter is really similar to the other spree counterspell, where it's just 2 mana, they pay 2, but then it has this extra benefit of pay 1 for each fairy you control. And so if you're running 4 Fairy Masterminds and you have the 2 Fabloom Tricks that's giving you 2 additional 1/1 fairies. Plus, it's things in the sky that's going to help out your Enduring Curiosity trigger, get those extra card draw. It's really sort of interesting tech. So we're seeing this being a little bit more common. We're running the Fabloom Tricks with the spell stutters for the counter spells. We're also seeing somewhat common and Nowhere to Run. The -3/-3 is really nice because it can get rid of the Heartfire Hero oftentimes without having to take any damage, or a Cacophony Imp. I think I'm saying that name right. Also, it's right in perfect range for Glissa. It's perfect range for Screaming Nemesis. So running a 1 of Nowhere to Run seems to be sort of a common tech that we're seeing. So overall, not seeing anything crazy in this deck other than they've decided to go with the fairy version that buffs the spell stutter. And they're not running a ton of counter spells in the main. It's almost all creature removal, because if we looked at the meta again, Gruul aggro, red deck wins, Boros burn, Boros mice are all really common decks, right? So you want to load up on that removal, and it's less of a counterspell play. Over in the sideboard, we see more removal, Anoint, the Blot Out, an additional cut down. Always got to include some Duress. Duress work really well, especially in like the Golgari Demons deck or any Annex-based deck, being able to strip an Annex out. It works well in the Mirror as well, being able to strip some of the additional spells out of their hands. So Duress is nice. Gix's Command for a nice little board wipe, gets rid of a bunch of tokens. Preacher of the Schism, this is really good to bring in against the aggro decks. You would drop something like Tishana's Tidebinder, for instance, to bring this in, because it's a 2/4 lifelink. So for a lot of the little guys that are coming through, you can block and kill pretty easily. Same thing for like the tokens decks. Can bring this in. Another Shieldred, some counter spells with Negate, another board wipe. This is really good, again, against the tokens, and then another counter spell here. So all that to be said, pretty standard stuff. We'll keep cruising here. This is another really interesting one. This is all about otters. This was sort of a fun version. So this is running the Storm Chasers talent that's creating a bunch of otters. I believe you can then bounce it with things like This Town Ain't Big Enough. And then you have a bunch of cheap spells, in all honesty, to kind of trigger the Storm Chasers or the Prowess otters. So things like the Analyze Pollen, it's cheap. Bushwhack is cheap. You have more Storm Chasers. Those are cheap at 1. And then up here, it's just a lot of value. This is a really interesting deck. I haven't really had a chance to deep dive into this deck, but it's all in and around all of these otters capabilities. So this is going to be one that we want to keep our eye on, right? This one is moving up the charts. It's an interesting deck. It has a lot of value. Interestingly enough, a lot of one-ofs that you kind of have to worry about. So if you're a player, an opponent of somebody that is a Temur Otters, you're like, it's so hard to track everything that they might have. Okay, are they going to play a Questing Druid, or did they hit their one-of Flood Pit, so I have to worry about them locking down a card? The one-of Screaming Nemesis in here, swinging in, stopping some of that life gain. These are all really interesting things that you got to be worried about when they have one of. Is like, do they have it in hand? How do I reliably play against it? I can't assume that they always have it because they're not running 4-ofs. So it's really interesting when folks are running the 1-ofs. But when you're really taking a look at a deck and what is it trying to do, a good place to start is in the 4-ofs. So the Thundertrap Trainer, the Enduring Vitality, the Torch the Tower, this Town Ain't Big Enough, the Bushwhack, and the Storm Chasers talent. Right, these are all things that you want to be on the lookout for, as to like the main game plan of the deck, and then the rest of it is okay. Really interesting flavor. What are some things I need to be on the lookout for? So as a contrast, so we kind of have an idea of this Temur Otters. Now, is the other Temur Otters that we saw here down in, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th place, went 6-1. They're running a very different game plan, right? They don't have a ton of one-ofs like the other one did, but you're still running the Enduring Vitality, the Thundertrap Trainer. They are running Questing Druid, the Valley Flood Caller, This Town Ain't Big Enough, the Torch the Tower, the Bushwhacks, as well as the 4 Storm Chasers talents. So, and then they're running actually rooms with Roaring Furnace and a couple of those. Still have the the Up the Beanstalk. So this is going to be one of those interesting ones. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Dimir, because there's so many ways to pack in value into Dimir, because there's so many good black and blue cards that you're like, okay, are they playing the Deep Cavern Bats version, or are they playing the Tishana in the main, or do they have Preacher of the Schism in the main? Do they have a Shieldred in the main, or is that only a sideboard card? Are they running 4 Kaito and 4 Enduring, or if they reduce the Kaito, are they running the fairy version of this deck? So there's so many different things you got to think about when you're playing against the Dimir deck. And I think we're going to run into that with the Temur Otters as well. So Temur Otters on our radar. This is a new one, might be a fun one for you. And it's a cheaper one too. So because it has a lot of really interesting cards, it might be one that's a little cheaper to get into. So like the 7th place one that we saw was only $229. So something you're interested in might be now might be a time to scoop it up while it's still cheap, before it gets really popular. Or the gamble you're taking is it could just get completely shut down. People are like, all right, what is this stupid Otters deck? I'm going to add 1-2 cards and just completely shut down this deck, and it's going to fall back down. But that's the nature of competitive, and we'll see what's going on. So let's take a look at the Gruul aggro, see if there's anything crazy here. Doesn't look like there's anything crazy. So you're running your standard Hired Claws, Emberheart Challengers, Heartfire Heroes, Questing Druids, Manifold Mouse, Paw Patch, Screaming Nemesis. You got the Burst Lightning, Monstrous Rage, Snakeskin. It's really interesting. All the Gruuls pretty much run 1 copy of Snakeskin. I would think that they would add 1 more, but most of them just run 1. An Obliterating Bolt in the main does 4 damage. That's a good like little threshold. And then the 4 Innkeepers. So nothing crazy here. Same thing over in the sideboard. Nothing crazy. This is a pretty standard Gruul aggro deck. The person just played it really solidly and got those 3 wins. So overall, really interesting challenge. Temur Otters came up. Dimir at the top, as we thought. And that was the... Oh, we started at the end. That's right. We started with this challenge. The next up is the MTGO Standard Super Qualifier. We're going to hit this one early because this was on Saturday, so 2 days ago as of the recording. Actually, today's the 30th. This is Friday. All right, we looked at an extra challenge. Let's go ahead, though, and look at what happened on Friday for this Super Qualifier. They played a ton of matches, 12 matches in a day. I don't know if you know how draining that is. I played 5, and I was like just absolutely spent in the last RCQ. But we see red deck wins. This is going to be a pretty standard deck, right? Emberheart, Monastery, Heartfire, Hired, Screaming Nemesis, Manifold. Then you're running your 4 ofs, Monstrous, Lightning Strike, Burst Lightning, and Witchstalker Frenzy. In the side, a little interesting case of the Crimson Pulse. If they're running out of cards, or if it's a bit more of a grindy match and they need to get more card draw, this is a really great card to have. Another interesting one I haven't really seen much of is the Tectonic Hazard. Tectonic Hazard deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. Good little board wipe. It is. It's a good little board wipe for those token decks making a bunch of 1/1s, or even the Temur Otters. They're making, because all of those Otters are 1/1s with prowess, so they might get in for some damage, but then they're all going to revert back down to 1/1. So taking those out in that Temur deck would be interesting as well. And then of course Urabrask's Forge. So just really solid play from a red deck wins player. Second player, so this is overall really interesting. So this is a paper tournament. So we got to take paper and digital kind of separately. It's a paper tournament. And we're not even seeing Dimir in the top 3 or top 4. We're seeing it in 6th place is the first Dimir that we're seeing. So that is sort of interesting. Golgari Demons, we're just making mental notes. That's what this means, mental notes. Golgari Demons, really solid list. This is pretty standard. Pack in the Mosswood Dread Knights in there, the Llanowar Elves. You got your Glissa, running your few Shieldreds. This has been an interesting tech that I've seen added recently to Golgari, is the Thrun Breaker of Silence. They're running 2 of. So first off, spell can't be countered. It has trample. And then it can't be target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. And as long as it's your turn, it has indestructible. So it can't be targeted by Go for the Throats. It can't be targeted by really any non-green removal. So red, like even if they had the Witchstalker Frenzy that does 5 damage, can't be targeted because it's red. So this is just putting down a super powerful creature that's hard to deal with the current meta, which is lots of red, lots of Dimir, which is blue and black. The only one that you got to really worry about is the mirror, but there's no green removal usually in the mirror other than Terra Sunder. So the only card right now that I can think of in the meta, I could be wrong, but the only one I can think of in the meta right now that can deal with Thrun is a Terra Sunder. So really interesting, really interesting. There is other things though, like the non-targeting destruction. So stuff like this, right? That would negative the card. So if I did a Harvester of Misery and a Nowhere to Run, that's 5 damage. So it would cost me 4, which is the same as Terra Sunder, to kill something. But I could remove it that way. Wait, no, that's target. So that's not true at all. So yeah, this is target. So there is some other ones though, like this one. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures. The other one I was thinking of is Blot Out. So having things that don't target the card to remove it is pretty much the only way to remove it. And there are a few options there. Maelstrom Pulse would work because... Actually, would it work? It's green, but it's also black. Interesting. Something to think about. All that to be said, new tech, something to be on the lookout for in your Golgari decks is the Thrun, Breaker of Silence. Rest of this pretty common. Preacher, Glissa, Go for the Throat, Anoint, Cut Down, running the End in the main, Terra Sunder in the main. Maelstrom Pulse has been really common. So again, this destroys a target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. So say you're going against the Temur Otters and they made like 5 Otters. It would destroy all the Otters. You would just select one Otter and it would destroy them. This could be great against the Mosswood. Maybe they have multiple Mosswoods out. Get rid of those. They could have multiple anything out, and it gets rid of multiple things for 3 mana. So you can potentially get a lot of value out of this card. And then running Gix Command in the main. Over on the sideboard, pretty common to see Nissa, Harvester of Misery, Nowhere to Run, Tranquil Frillbacks, Duress, Terra Sunders, the End, and a Ghost Vacuum for that Graveyard Hate. So overall, pretty common setup, minus this new tech with the Thrun, which is really interesting. And then we see an Esper Pixies in... the MTGO, this is online. This is not in person. So that is something to... Okay, MTGO Standard Super Qualifier. I think in the main list it just said Standard Super Qualifier. But no, this was an MTGO event. So we're seeing Esper Pixies taking a top 4 here. But if you haven't seen Esper Pixies, this version is running Spiteful Hexmage, but what we'll see is Fear of Isolation, Nurturing Pixie, and the Optimistic Scavenger. Where's that one? The Fear of the Isolation is what I was thinking of. And those are all there to, as well as This Town Ain't Big Enough, to bounce things like Hopeless Nightmare, Nowhere to Run, the Storm Chaser's Talent, and normally we also see some more like card removal or like the artifact that, we're not seeing it here. The artifact that destroys a creature. So the whole game plan about this is using things like the Fear of Isolation and Nurturing Pixie and This Town Ain't Big Enough to bounce cards back into your hand and then be able to play them again for cheap. And then if you do something like Storm Chaser's Talent, you have a bunch of cheap cards that you can play. You're going to be making a bunch of Otters and using the prowess ability on those Otters to make those big and swinging in with those. So it's really kind of a control-y bounce deck, which is really interesting. I had some fun with it. It actually helped me get into Mythic myself, so I have enjoyed Esper Pixies. And then we see mono white tokens in the fourth place. Again, pretty standard mono white tokens list. Not seeing anything crazy in here at all. Maybe Lyra, Dawnbringer in the side, but they have one of. The Regal Caracal, again, one of. Another ossification. So nothing crazy there. But interestingly enough, we saw the new tech in Golgari, and we see Esper Pixies in the top 3. So Esper Pixies might be something a little bit more dangerous to worry about than we thought of. And then with that Golgari Demon, got to be on the lookout for that Thrun Breaker of Silence as well. No, they did say MTGO. I'm just dumb. Sorry about that. This is not a paper event. This was an online event, but it was a huge MTGO online event. We'll keep cruising, jump up into the challenge that also occurred on Saturday. We're seeing something similar, Gruul aggro. We're seeing red deck wins, and then this just says deck. What is this? Yeah, what is this? Okay, so this is a completely new deck. It just says deck. It's running Shieldred Arcane Proxy, which has a prototype. You can pay it for 1 colorless, 2 blue, and it's a 2/1. Enters the battlefield if it was cast, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card, and you may cast a copy. So you're casting this to be able to get back access to instant or sorcery. Yeah, so you can get your cut downs, your go for the throat, an opt, chart of the course, sleight of hand. This is enchantment. So you can go back and get a lot of your cards for really cheap. And then you can also play it for 7 if you want. I don't know if you would have anything that big. I think you're mostly just using it for your cut downs, go for the throw, ops, chart of course, and sleight of hands. And then Thundertrap Trainer again. Again, a reminder, Thundertrap Trainer, it says when this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a non-creature card, non-land card from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest in the bottom of your library. You get to do that twice if you paid for the offspring cost on that. So it's just helping you search cards. We all know cut down, this ain't big, this town ain't big enough, go for the throw, opt, chart of course, sleight of hand. Really interesting. Just this looks like a nice little custom brew. Just playing some high value cards, controlling the board with a lot of removal, retrieving more removal, creating those otters, lots of cheap spells to buff the otters, and then other creatures that you're playing with are, this 2/1, the Thundertrap Trainer and the Shieldred. So it's really mostly about going back, getting those otters, making more otters, and giving prowess to those otters. So really interesting deck in the 3rd place here. We'll take a look quickly at Gruul to see if there's any new tech. Not seeing anything crazy. Soulstone Sanctuary in the sideboard, which is interesting. Ghost Vacuum, pick your poison. Yep, all pretty standard Gruul aggro. Same thing with red deck wins. It's pretty solid format. They call it red deck wins, but this is Boros Mice. Boros Mice is really interesting. Actually, I think fun fact, I do believe Boros Mice won the RCQ I was at this past weekend. So they either got first or second, because I think it was a 2-slot RCQ. So it was cool to see Boros Mice. I have altered my Boros aggro deck to be a Boros Mice deck. So that is something exciting to see, that it can go that far and could potentially get me the invites I need in standard. But this is not a red deck wins. This is a Boros Mice deck, which is pretty standard. Boros Mice. Nothing crazy here. And then rounding out, we'll just take a quick glance at what else we see. Another red deck wins, an Esper Pixie, Gruul aggro, and a Jeskai Convoke. So I thought Jeskai Convoke would start doing a little bit better, but we're seeing Pixie in there. So we've done this one. Let's do the Friday night showdown. This is in the Philippines. It's a small tournament, so we're not going to spend too much time on here. Jeskai Convoke, Dimir aggro. Interesting. So they just packed in a bunch of really cheap creatures for the aggro, and then it's a pretty standard Dimir package after that. Mono white, and then red-green prowess, so that's your Gruul prowess deck, but smaller tournament, and it's in the Philippines, so we can kind of ignore that. And then next up, we have another challenge from MTGO taking place on Sunday, and we see Golgari Demons taking this one. Again, let's take a look. I don't think that we're going to see anything crazy. We're seeing Thrun. I'm thinking Thrun's going to be the standard. Like, you're just going to have to put it in. We're just going to see, like, hey, this is a common card now. So Thrun is doing some absolute work in the Golgari deck. So if you're not running Thrun, you might want to consider it. Outside of that, pretty standard package. Not seeing anything crazy. We're going to go over here in the sideboard, see if we see anything different. Nope. This is pretty standard Golgari Demons deck. It's not running Annex, which is interesting. So Golgari Demons without Annex. I don't know why they're calling it Demons. I would say this is more of a Golgari mid-range deck than a Golgari Demons deck. Azorius Tempo. Haven't seen a lot of these, but this is an interesting deck. I've known of these decks, but I haven't seen a lot of them. So your bombs in this are Kiora, the Rising Tide, getting you that 8/8. Aberrant Oculus, also a huge bomb. Picklock Prankster, go get you some cards. Haughty Jin, another big card to deal with. Is this... No, this is... Azorius, are they calling it Azorius Tempo? This is like the Graveyard Recursion Azorius. So because you have Helping Hand, you have Recommission, so you're getting your Kiora back, you're getting your Aberrant Oculus back, you're getting your Haughty Jin back. You could potentially flip them again with Oculus because of the Manifest Dread. And then you're controlling the board a bit with Soul Partition, Unsummon. You also have, what else do we have for removal? Not a lot for removal. That's kind of it for removal. And then Founding in the Third Path. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value 1 or 2 from your hand without paying its mana cost. Target player mills 4 cards and exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Copy it. So basically, it's giving you that, if you Manifest Dread, giving you that ability to go back and get your Soul Partitions, your Unsummons, getting your Helping Hands or Recommission to be able to resurrect. So the big scary thing for this deck is anything with Graveyard Hate. So anything with Graveyard Hate makes this deck, just shuts it down, and it makes it really hard to play. But they took second in this event. We also see Gruul Aggro end up finishing out the top 3. And again, quickly, we're not seeing anything different other than they're only running 2 Innkeepers. We've been seeing 4 lately, and nothing else different. So that's going to round out the top 3 in the challenge here on the 28th. And now we actually have, this is a paper event. We don't have a lot of results here, but Dimir mid-range took the paper event, almost a sweep. We have it first, second, and third place is the Gruul Prowess. We can take a look at this and see if they're running anything crazy. They're running a one-of Mockingbird. Are they running... They're not running the other Ninja. But then they're running an Urtai in here. This used to be pretty common tech. Then they're running 2 Preachers, 2 Tishanas. Interesting. 3 Enduring. And then you got your standard package, Fairy, Flood Pits, Spyglass in here. Then they are running the spell Stutter, but they're not running the other card that generates more pixies. So they're running spell Stutter for their counterspell. Nowhere to Run. And then Kaito. Over on the sideboard, we got Cut Downs, Disfigures, Duress, Anoint, Blot Out, Malicious, Preacher, Tishanas. Yeah, nothing crazy other than they're really wide in their game plan, which is interesting. Generally, folks are going to be a little bit cleaner in their game plan, running more 4-ofs, but they have a lot of just like options as what they gave themselves. Mockingbird also does make it basically add 1 more of whatever you have. So it's like having 4 Spyglass, 5 Mastermind, 5 Flood Pits, 3 Preachers, 3 Tishanas, 3 Endurings, 3 Urtais and 2 Urtais and 2 Shieldreds and 4 Endurings. Forget my numbers, right? You get what I'm saying. By running the Mockingbird, you essentially are adding 1 more to each one of these. Because when you cast that, you get to copy something. So all that to be said, interesting thoughts. Same. See over here, now we're running like just a standard 4-of package, but we're going to take all of this with a grain of salt. It was a smaller tournament. and we're not seeing a ton of results here. So all that to say, Dimir was really strong. Next challenge, we're seeing another Dimir. Let's see if we're seeing anything crazy. Nope, this is running pretty solid 4 ofs. We're seeing the Spell Stutter and the Fey Bloom Trick, so they're getting a lot of value out of that Spell Stutter. Nowhere to run in the main, 4 Kaitos. Over in the sideboard, nothing crazy. Nothing crazy, pretty standard sideboard. So good to see, pretty standard mid-range. Guess what? It's creeping its ugly head. Shouldn't say ugly head, but it is really interesting that we're seeing Esper Pixies coming around again. This version also playing the Spiteful Hexmage. Tithing Blade is the artifact I was thinking of. Being able to bounce this over and over again just keeps clearing their board, or killing a creature on their board. And oftentimes you can play it twice in a turn, so you're killing 2 creatures at a time, right? So play it, bounce it with something like Nurturing Pixie, and then play it again if you have 5 mana. So you could just kill 2 cards really quickly. Also, you can craft with creature. If you do craft this, it does turn into this artifact that at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So if you don't plan on bouncing this for a while, you need a mana sink. You can flip it, and it's going to tick them for 1 every turn. And then if at a later time you need some removal, you can just bounce this back into your hand and then play it again for removal. So if you know you're not going to use it for anything for a couple turns, you need a mana sink. You know, being able to flip that and doing some extra life or damage to their life is interesting. All that to be said, this seems pretty similar to the last one that we saw with the Spiteful Hexmage. Over here in the sideboard, some different interesting ones. Sporogenic Infection. When it enters, target player sacrifices a creature other than enchanted creature. Then enchanted creature is dealt damage, it destroy it. So this is a fun little bounce target. You can, if they have multiple cards, put it on one that you don't want to kill, and then they have to kill the other one. Shrouded Shepherd, we're seeing that one. Rest in Peace, this is for that Graveyard Hate that we talked about for the Azorius Tempo deck. Some counter spells, Meticulous Excavation. This is the new one. Return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was unearth, instead exile it, then return that card to its owner's hand. Activate only during your turn. So, and this can be done multiple times. So if you get this down, now I have ways to keep bouncing things back into my hand continuously with Meticulous Excavation. Get out, some destroy either another Tithing Blade and another Sheltered by Ghost. So tech is still being figured out for Esper Pixie. Then we're going to see Gruul aggro. This seems pretty standard Gruul aggro. Nothing crazy, nothing crazy. Nope. Other than running a Pyroclasm. 2 damage everything, which also hurts you. So all that to be said, nothing crazy in the top 3 except for Esper Pixie. We see, again, this deck. This is just... it's kind of Esper Pixies. It's kind of Esper Pixie. Rounding out 4, and then 5, we have Red Deck Wins, and Azorius Flash is, what is that? 6, 7 is another Dimir, and another Gruul aggro. So, moving up into one of my favorite regions for tournaments is Japan. So I always feel like Japan is kind of like ahead of the curve, trying new tech, trying crazy things. So really good to kind of take a look at what's going on here. And it was a bigger tournament, 29 players. So when you take a look at paper and you look at the meta, like different regions are going to have different value, right? Japan, super strong region. Go ahead, even take a look at their smaller tournaments. For other regions, you might not want to. Like if you're looking in the U.S., there's strong regions in the South. You know, looking at like the Texas, some of the bigger cities in Texas. If you look over west, you know, in California, the San Diego region is going to be really strong players. Midwest is pretty good, strong. Minnesota, Chicago, moving into like Michigan, Detroit areas are all going to have really strong player base. If you're looking at another like big city hub on the east, you're looking at like New York is going to be strong. If you look in some of the other smaller regions, like even if you're like in the Midwest, right? If different states are going to have different strengths, or if you're looking down in the South, you know, different states are going to have different strengths, and even different cities. So it's kind of something that you get a feel for as you play competitively. You'll start to figure out where the strong regions are. And then when you look over in like Europe, there's not a ton of strong regions in Europe. There's some strong players, but not a ton of strong regions. But Japan is definitely a strong country region. So this is one we'll want to take a look at. We're going to look at the Dimir mid-range, see if they're doing anything crazy. Again, pretty clean. This is pretty clean. And they're running the fairy version. So I think the fairy version is starting to come to the top as one of the strongest Dimir versions out there. Then we get the Boros, or the Prowess aggro. This is a Gruul aggro deck. Again, pretty standard. Running a Paw Patch. We see that from time to time with the Paw Patch, but running one of the Paw Patch is really interesting. And then over in the sideboard, nothing crazy. And then finishing out the top three is another Dimir. And we're going to see it's sort of an interesting mix of Tishanas and Preachers, but pretty standard card selection. Then we have the Feybloom with the Spell Stutter. Again, so this is sort of that fairy version of Dimir. They just didn't go as strong into the fairy as some of the other stuff. Taking a look at the sideboard, though, not seeing anything crazy. They are rounding out with 3 more Preacher of the Schisms to have a potential of running 4. Like I said, it's really good against the aggro deck, so this is probably why it's in there. Slap that in there. You're going to run 4 of. You're going to drop the Tishanas. You probably drop like an Enduring Curiosity or something like that to run 4 of Preacher of Schisms, which is just going to be super strong. 2/4 body that we'll run. Then finishing out the top 4 is a Temur Prowess. So this is that. This is what we saw with the. Yeah, this is the Otters. Basically, it's the Temur Otters deck. So Temur Otters and Esper Pixie is what we're seeing some interesting decks here. So that was a really fun one. We have another one. I believe this is another Japanese tournament. Excuse me if I don't know Japanese versus Korean. I can tell it's not Chinese. I could also be wrong. I could just be wrong. I could be wrong all around. All that to be said, we have another strong. I think it's another Japanese tournament, but this was a bigger one. 93 players. This was done on Arena, which was interesting. I don't understand the records. They all said 1-0. But this is a Mardu mid-range. So I think this is the, like, why do they call it Mardu? There's no red. I think this is Orzhov Bats. This is like the Orzhov life gain deck. It's interesting. Really interesting. So something to be on the lookout for. This is not really the life gain deck either. It does have some bats, demons. It's really control-y. Shelter by Ghosts. It's got Annex in it. Really interesting. So Authority of Councils is for the aggro decks. Rest in Peace is for the Azorius Tempo deck. More aggro deck shut down. Things like that. So really interesting deck. Took first. Something to be on the lookout. This is just a lot of really like good control, a lot of stuff in the air or Death Touch. Just absolutely strong cards. Control with Deep Cavern Bat, even Interrupter, the End, Virtue, or the Get Lost, the Destroy Evil, Sheltered by Ghosts. You know, got a lot of control, shutting down the board. And then just getting value out of things like Unholy Annex, your Virtue of Loyalty, Shieldred, Preacher of the Schism, the Aklazot's Deepest Betrayal. So really interesting sort of like Demon Bats deck going on here. Something to be on the lookout for. Maybe we're into some new tech here. Then we see Dimir mid-range, and they are not going with the Pixie version. They did not go with the Pixie version. They don't even run any. Well, they run one Spell Stutter. I was going to say they didn't run any counter spells, but they do run at least one. So this is just a solid Dimir deck. No Pixie or no fairies in here. And one Deep Cavern Bat, which is kind of interesting. Over in the sideboard, pretty standard build against the current meta. so nothing crazy there. Another Dimir mid-range. Spyglass. This one is running. Not running. Okay. So they're running more counter spells. Spell Stutter, the 3 steps ahead, as an additional counter spell. Then they're controlling the board with Cut Down, Go for the Throat, Anoint with Affliction, Bitter Triumph, Nowhere to Run. They're running the Mockingbirds to be able to do, essentially, increase the number of cards that they have here. So really, it's like playing 4 Spyglass, 4 Floodblitz, etc., etc., etc. But interesting. More counter spells, but not running Pixies. And then over in the sideboard, they are running a Stab, which we haven't seen a lot of Stab. A Withering Torment, haven't seen a lot of those either. A Shoot the Sheriff, haven't seen a lot of those. And then some more Tishanas in the side. Well, Tishanas in the sideboard because they're not running any in the main, and then some Duress. So that will finish out the top 3 for this tournament. In the rest of the top 4, we're going to see a mono black aggro deck, which is interesting. I think this is more like the interesting. Just a solid. I thought it was going to be more like the zombie deck that I've seen, but it does have some like skeletal synergies. Interesting. Okay. So mono black aggro, maybe something to keep on your radar as well. Then we see Gruul aggro, Gruul Delirium. We haven't seen any of those in our reviews yet, but this is really taking fact. This is kind of an aggro deck because you're getting these Wildfire Wickerfolk down fast. Your Keen-Eyed Curator gets massive. Patchwork Beastie, is activating pretty quick. Omnivorous Flytrap. So yeah, you're getting some access to some fun with Delirium. So we're definitely seeing Delirium pop up from time to time, but haven't seen any in a tournament. This is an arena tournament, so it makes sense that I see it here. So that's 2, 4, 6, and then 7th place is another Dimir, and then we have another mono black mid range, finishing out the top 8. And then finally we have the big brain bouts. We're gonna see Golgari combo deck. Interesting. So Overlord, Thorn Vault, Osteomancer, Curious Forger. Okay. This took first. It's a smaller tournament, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. It could have just been really well with the meta that's going on, but might be a deck to play around with and take a look at. So looking for some combo game. I haven't seen this deck yet, so I'm not entirely sure what the combo is in this deck, but this is definitely something that you could potentially consider in your playthroughs. Do some testing and see if it'll work against the meta. The rest of what we see, I think, is pretty common. We're going to see the Domain deck running the Flood Pits, the Hauntwoods, and the Mistmoors. There's another Domain deck that runs the Boiler one, so the Red Overlord, and then running Zur. And the whole thing is get Zur out and then make all of your enchantments crazy powerful. And then Dimir Control. This one's a little bit different. This one does not have the standard Dimir package. This is why Dimir can be crazy. So this is all about controlling the board, lots of removal. You're really trying to win with your Jace, your Restless Reefs are helping you get some additional damage in. Instants and sorceries are cost less with Mind Splice, Apparatus. You got what? Anything else in here? How are you winning the game with this? Draw X cards, Deadly Cover Up, your destroy all creatures of a different kind. So you are getting to your Breach the Multiverse. So you're pulling creatures out of their deck to play as well. But outside of that, I think you're really trying to mill them out is the other way to win. Getting damage with your Restless Reef, stealing cards of their own with the Breach the Multiverse, and then the rest of the time you're basically making it so they can't do anything. So that is Dimir Control. I have seen this deck a few times, but I have not seen it a lot. So This is a really interesting top 3 Dimir Control. Again, smaller tournament. It is a arena tournament as well, it looks like. But something to be on the lookout for. Azorius Aggro, we've seen this. Actually, have we seen this one? Oh, yeah, this is the Regal Bunnycorn one. This one's fun. You just get a bunch of cheap stuff down. You get a big old Regal Bunnycorn up there. Leyline of the Axe does some absolute work here. So, fun little deck and took top 4. And then finishing out the top 8, we see a Grixis Control, a Domain Ramp, a Domain Control, and a Dimir Fairies deck, which we've talked about. The only one that's sort of interesting here is this Grixis Control. I've not seen this Grixis Control one before. Actually, I think I have. Mazemind Tomb. It's just, yeah, controlling the board again. Trying to mill them out. Stealing. We don't steal cards with this one. Yeah, just controlling the board. We do get a creature out here. It's got a flying first strike at the beginning of your upkeep. Exile top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile the land card this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exiled a non-land card this way, create a treasure token. So this is helping you get something on the board. Otherwise, you're really kind of controlling things and then trying to mill them out. And then you have a very interesting sideboard that works against the current meta. Urabrask getting in there if maybe you need some more damage to try to finish out the game. Breach the Multiverse to try to get some more cards, more deadly cover-ups. So that might be another one to keep a lookout. This got 5th place at that last tournament. So all that to be said, that was the past weekend's tournament results. What we're seeing is Esper Pixies. Let's pop this up. Esper Pixies has come to the top 3. I don't think we saw a win from Esper Pixies, but the fact that was in several top 3s is definitely something to be on the lookout for. We're seeing some really interesting brews. We see a couple of those just said deck. So it's something to be on the lookout for. Grixis, or not Grixis, Golgari is another one. Running that Thrun is really interesting. So something that we want to be a lookout because Golgari is really common. Outside of that, we're seeing a lot of results with the red decks, Boros Mice, Gruul Aggro, a lot of really solid results. I still think we're seeing the most winningest deck as the Dimir. Somebody once told me that Dimir mid-range or the Dimir deck is really interesting because it has a much higher skill ceiling, but it has a much steeper learning curve. So the really, really good players are going to see really good results with Dimir mid-range. But what we see also is a lot of these red decks, they might have a much lower ceiling as far as skill goes. So it takes much less knowledge and expertise to pilot that deck the most efficient that you can. And that deck is so strong in and of itself that you're able to perform really well at tournaments with this deck. But like what we're seeing is really skilled players with Dimir are able to counter that play against red and take more wins in general. So that's why we're going to continue to see red-based decks doing well and winning tournaments. But I think we're going to continue to see more of the Dimir winning. We are seeing some Golgari wins here and there. Another one that we want to be on the lookout for is that Temur Otters deck is another really interesting deck that we'll be on the lookout for. So all that to be said, I would love to hear more from you and what deck you plan on playing at your local tournaments. And we're going to continue to do this series. So let me know your thoughts on this series, anything that you would like to see in the meta breakdown. And this series is focused mostly on, or 100% on tournament results and like what you're going to see at tournaments and how to prepare for tournaments and maybe give you some ideas of what deck you might want to take to your local tournament, hopefully to your RCQ, so that you can win your RCQ and I can see you in the regional championships. That's what I want to see. I want to qualify for the regional championships. I want to see you at the regional championships. And hopefully this gives you some great ideas about how to do so. And so you've made it this far in the video. You know what to do. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, do all the things. Come hang out with me. I do some live streams from now and then. Usually every day I'll do a live stream. And then you can come check those out. And then You're going to find all of your Magic the Gathering content here. We're going to continue to do meta breakdowns. We're going to continue to do our news pieces, tournament coverages, and then with every new set, I'm going to do a Bronze to Mythic run, maybe, just to see how that goes. And you're going to find all that content right here. But as we like to finish everything around here, until next time, we'll catch you at the table.